surely the image of the week, if not the image of the month when it comes to politics,
or the year or the century,
indeed, is the sight of the Chancellor of the Exchequer crying in Parliament. That's going to haunt Labour for a long time, isn't it?
I think it also should haunt us as British people. And I mean, how do we explain it? She came up with this nonsense, clearly, of, oh, it's a private matter. I think it was something much more fundamental. This is a woman, let's put it completely bluntly, who knows she's been found out. She actually knows she represents a supposed economic policy, an economic theory, which was lies. And she's at the heart of a government which, even with a majority of 165, can't govern. This woman lied at every stage of her CV. Every single thing she said was a bit, a bit like Reynolds, the business secretary. Everything is just that little bit detached from.
Who claimed to be a solicitor when he was actually a trainee solicitor.
I mean, an uncompleted trainee. And I'm going to give you a little test. Do you remember the MACE lecture, the MAIS lecture of last March?
No, because she said almost nothing. I remember reading it, contrasting it with Nigel Lawson's brilliant Mays lecture of the mid-'80s, which were literally mold-breaking, era-defining, revolutionising macroeconomics. Somebody just pumping out soft-left PPE nostrums.
Yes, but careful. She claimed, and she was believed by most of the commentariat, to be advancing what she thought was an economic theory that, on the one hand, reckoned with this wonderful thing called economic stabilization, and on the other, vast investment in the public sector. And you remember, she called it securonomics. And the idea was that you could spend and should spend on climate change mitigation, on EV, on the whole business of windmills, on roads, on hospitals, or the entire public sector. And do you know what? Mysteriously, this would bring about economic growth. It was, if you remember, it's called new supply side economics. It's this extraordinary fixation with a particular kind of Democrat policy, the most recent expression of it being the so-called Bidenomics of Janet Yellen. So you get, it's the equivalent of a New Deal. It's a New Deal in theory based around the mitigation of climate change. So, you get renewables and vast investment in infrastructure. It's just old-fashioned Keynesianism. It's a new form, as Keynes said, of paying people to dig a hole in the ground and then fill it up again. And any economic benefits are accidental. It sort of worked in America for a simple reason. But the Biden government could and did borrow vast amounts of money. And I don't know whether you remember, the only really sharp comment, and I'm afraid I didn't read yours, on the Mace lecture was from Jason Cowley. And what he said was, he came up with this wonderful phrase, it's Bidenomics without the bucks. And we are now in the very simple position that the Labour Party is the party of the public sector. It sold itself this bizarre notion that if you pour money into the NHS, pour money into the nationalised railways, pour money into the various fantastical schemes that Ed Miliband is running around with, mysteriously growth will happen. We all know, of course, it won't, because they've got to increase taxation. And they've chosen to increase the very worst kind of taxation directly on jobs.
I agree with you, David, the sort of soft Labour left's fixation with America. Gordon Brown had it. He famously used to go to, Martha's Vineyard every summer, get his fix from the Harvard Kennedy School form of economics. Plenty of copies of J.K. Galbraith's works, dog-eared in downstairs toilets across the sort of brownite wing of New Labour. But of course, New Labour also had the Blairite wing, and the Blairite wing would always make sure there were serious people in the room, people who understood financial markets when big decisions were made, people that countered Brown's big state, Clydeside instincts, people like the late Derek Scott, former city economist, big in New Labour, Gavin Davies, Goldman Sachs partner, big into financial markets. There is no one at the top of Labour now that understands financial markets. And whereas Reeves, the big state descendant of Brown, in a new Labour government, a Blairite government, would have been, the left extreme of the people in the room when the decisions are made. She's now the standard bearer for fiscal prudence, even though her instincts are just as statist as Brown's. And another difference, David, is that when Brown came in to number 11, national debt was less than 40% of GDP.
The really important difference is that this government succeeded to a Tory government that had failed. To a Tory government that had failed because it continued Brownite policies, which have ruined our public finances. The reason, you can tell me all about those so-called realistic economists under Blair. The real truth was they simply inherited what Thatcher had done, and they gradually eroded it. The great changing point, the moment at which everything goes wrong, and here you are the economist, is 2008. It's the financial crisis. I think we, unlike any other major economy, have never recovered from that. What happened to the City of London at that point, of course, again, the complete Brownite reaction to it was, we got into the mess because we took risks. Therefore, we shouldn't take any more risks. You create the whole structure of the FCA, one of these central quangos that is such an extraordinary feature of the Blairite state, and it has slowly throttled the City of London. And the City of London was, as we all know, the great milch cow of New Labour, the famous remark of Peter Mandelson. By the way, can I tell you, as we're being terribly serious, my latest Peter Mandelson story. I met Peter, whom I know a little bit, literally a few hours before he caught the plane to DC and his elegant elegant Lutyens residence up there. And do you know what he was doing and where I saw him?
God.
It was in the Burlington Arcade, practically bent double under expensive shopping bags, illustrating he was more or less crawling on the ground with the weight, whether they were bribes, whether they were ornaments for the bathroom or whatever, I'm not sure. But anyway, the gross excess of New Labour, which was powered on the basis of Thatcherism, that has just slowly died. It's been squeezed out of the economy. So what we can now see is the Labour Party the Labour Party as it is now has got a single purpose, which is to squeeze money out of the out of the private sector to put into the hands of its client welfare class. That's all it is?
We're now in the realms, though, of what Keith Joseph called a situation where the rider is heavier than the horse, where the public sector is actually now outstripping the size of the private sector, is crowding out investment in the private sector. And no instinct in Rachel Reeves' body, unlike the Blairites, would acknowledge that there might be something called a Laffer curve. And I think we're beyond the peak of the Laffer curve.
So in other words, increasing taxation is not actually going to increase revenue.